Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have to say this is an extraordinary motion to bring before this council. What you're doing here is you're retrospectively trying to gain approval for a decision that was made well outside the principles of good governance and accountability. I won't be supporting it. This motion actually would have been supportable. In fact, it would have been laudable had it been brought prior to the decision to go ahead with the decision to install 4 basketball courts during the period of a plan of management, when the community were specifically denied opportunities to have a say in additional building on that site. This motion is clearly 4 months too late. And bear in mind, the community were told they couldn't install so much as a park bench or a drinking fountain because that plan of management was under development. And council has gone ahead and installed not just a basketball court, but an outdoor basketball precinct. This motion looks to rewrite history and say that this was the decision all along, which was quite not at all the case. And in fact, the horse has now bolted, it's long gone. The construction of those basketball courts is now underway. And this just can't be how council does business. National Park is community land. When we seek community input, we're getting a mandate for the kinds of things that we do on that land. It's not up to council to decide unilaterally. No one on this council has the right to decide unilaterally what happens on community land. That's why we go to consultation. That's why we have a whole series of processes around a plan of management to ensure that the uses of our community land are consistent with all of the principles and do find a balance. The fact that the basketball courts are well liked, the fact that the basketball courts people like them, has absolutely nothing to do with the decision to unilaterally push ahead with a decision during a plan of management process that we knew was going to be controversial. And we knew it because in October of 2019, we actually passed a notice of motion unanimously. It was brought to the council by Councillor White, which called on the council, and I'll read it specifically, the community interest in being involved in the future planning of the National Park precinct, including the future use of the former Life Without Barriers and bowling club sites. We very rarely make a specific note of the need to involve a community in a decision-making process, and that clearly indicates that we were expecting a high level of community engagement. More to the point, the community engagement that was conducted for the development of this plan indicated that only 2% of respondents who were asked the question, what do you want to see at National Park, only 2% said more basketball courts. That's significantly lower than other outdoor sports, including netball, which had 17%, volleyball and tennis. Tennis actually being the former use of that site, outscored basketball in terms of the desired use. We still don't have any explanation as for why basketball was the chosen alternative, given that other alternatives had more significant community support in the context of that engagement. There's no rationale here or still as to why there was so much urgency in the construction of those courts, why it needed to supersede a properly conducted good governance plan of management process. We should, at the very least, have waited until that plan of management had run its course. At the very least, we should have seen the review of requirements for future basketball facilities, which we actually agreed that we would look at in the context of the sports management plan. But we've jumped that gun. We've jumped the gun on the plan of management, and we've installed something without due process, without good governance, and without accountability. That's highly irregular at best. This motion itself is an admission that the initial decision to build those basketball courts was entirely unjustified and entirely out of order in relation to the process that we had agreed to. I won't be supporting this, and I won't be supporting any council decision or any council attempt to make decisions after the fact. Extraordinary process and will not have my support. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
You're welcome, Councillor. What I would say to that is it's very disappointing that this issue is being politicised, and it's very disappointing for the Friends of National Park, I believe as well, because I think they're being used as political footballs in this process. And that whole speech and diatribe on council processes and staff is very grandstandy at best and very glib. This process actually ran through several budgetary line items and was approved by Councillor Mackenzie and the majority of councillors on a number of occasions. There was a lot of communication that went out about the construction of the public open space and the basketball courts. And what I note is there was no extra community consultation about the public open space, but because certain people on this council, like Councillor Mackenzie, are happy about the public green space and the investment we made on that side, but they question council officers' decision on the other side. So you can't have it both ways. You can't pretend that the community consultation needed to happen only on tennis courts, with disused tennis courts, and not happen on the other side. Furthermore, the consultation was just the first round of a very long process. So what Councillor Mackenzie essentially just said this evening, he was quite happy to keep the black asphalt disused tennis courts there for 5 to 10 years. And I actually think that council staff have done the right thing, because 5 to 10 years of just unused black asphalt sitting in the centre of the city is not an acceptable outcome. Absolutely not an acceptable outcome. Now, the council staff have actually taken it upon themselves with budgetary line items and through normal processes to install basketball courts at Novocastrian Park, at Empire Park, out at Wallsend, and it's gone through exactly the same process. The only difference here is that the Friends of National Park have been very explicit that they want the whole area as public green open space. Now, under the plan of management that was adopted in 2012, that area is identified for sporting uses, and the council staff has followed the plan of management and invested in local sporting infrastructure. Now, I don't think it's okay to sit back and say, using the veil of fake community consultation to pretend that it's okay to leave that black asphalt there for any more years. I actually think that we should have been much more proactive and had that black asphalt converted into courts or activated in some way many years ago. So I think this investment is actually long overdue in the northwestern corner, and I think it's wonderful that we've invested in the over 9,000 square metres of public open space. It's an excellent outcome, and the community are very happy with it. There is no difference in this process to any other park in Newcastle. It's just that you have a certain subset of people in the community that wanted something different on that asphalt. But the majority of people I speak to are very happy with the outcome, and I think council staff have followed the right process. And if any councillor wanted to question the process or ask about the process or be involved in the budgetary process that's gone over 2 budget cycles, I think after the fact of already letting a tender and the work already happening is a little bit too late. So I think it's all a bit glib and very grandstandy. Any other speakers? Councillor Church.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I agree that basketball is a great sport, very popular, and look, I'm not a very good player of it, but I certainly enjoy it, and many people do. I don't think that's the issue at play here. I'm a little concerned that you've described what I thought was a very passionate speech by Councillor Mackenzie about a subject that matters to him very much, which is due process. You described that as diatribe. I don't think that's appropriate language for this chamber, and is a little disrespectful.
Well, Councillor Church, if I might, I do believe that it was appropriate, given that the director and the manager are responsible for delivering wonderful community infrastructure.
Point of order, Lord Mayor.
Yes, Councillor.
The councillor has a right to be heard without verbal interjections under 77.1.2 of the Code of Meeting Practice.
Councillor Church, I do believe that it is an apt description given
Point of order, Lord Mayor. You're required to make a decision on that.
I don't uphold your point of order because you're...
Motion of dissent, Lord Mayor.
Is there a seconder for that motion? The motion is seconded. All those in favour of the motion of dissent from the Chair's ruling, please raise your hand. All those against, please raise your hand. The motion is defeated. It's interesting that the Code of Meeting Practice is being used to hammer staff's implementation of public infrastructure.
Point
And
of
I
order,
think-
Lord Mayor.
Councillor Mackenzie.
You cannot make, and I'll read quite specifically, you cannot imply improper motives to any councillor in a council meeting. That's section 79.1.5.
Councillor Mackenzie, I am not implying improper motives. I'm simply stating the fact of the matter of what was said about the staff's intentions in this precinct. And continually interjecting is also not very helpful. You have made your point. We all let you go over time to make your point. Your point is well made. We're very well aware of your feelings. And I absolutely disagree with you. And I actually don't think it's fair on the staff, particularly the staff that are here this evening.
Just to clarify the point of order, the point of order is in relation to my use of the code of meeting practice to attack staff. That was what the point of order was in relation to.
That's not what you said. You said that it was in regards to interjecting.
That was the first one.
Well, you weren't very clear, councillor. You probably just need to take a
That
breath.
was defeated.
And
That was
you
excuse
probably
me.
just need to take a breath and calm down. And like, I know we're not in the same room, but if we were, you would be yelling at me. Like, you're coming through my microphone in a very aggressive yelling tone. So maybe just take a breath and calm down. Okay?
Okay. Lord Mayor, I'd like to move point of order in relation to the implication that I was using the code of meeting practice to cast aspersions on the staff. I was using the code of meeting practice to ensure that the councillor was able to be heard without interjection.
I don't uphold your point of order because that's not what was actually being discussed. You've interpreted it the wrong way. Councillor Church, I don't agree with your assertions at all. As you can see, Councillor Mackenzie is very riled up and very flustered over this and has a very different opinion to a number of councillors. And I can see a lot of division being created in the community that is very unnecessary over what is very good public infrastructure. And I don't think it is fair to criticise staff processes to make that political point. And that's exactly what happened last week, and that is exactly what is happening now. And I use the example that this type of infrastructure is delivered on other parts around the city, and there is no interjection from councillors. I don't see the same interjection over at Empire Park, where tennis courts have just been converted into basketball courts. There has not been any requests from councillors or any understanding that it had to be a discussion among councillors or the broader community. Exactly the same process was followed by staff at that park. So I don't agree with the argument that somehow this process was different. They have followed the plan of management to a T in delivering community infrastructure that I think is a very good outcome. And just because some councillors aren't happy about it, it doesn't mean that you can actually criticise staff processes. And that exactly did happen at the public voice last week, which I don't think was fair either. Are there any other speakers?
Lord Mayor, I'd like to continue my comments, if you
Go
like.
ahead.
I think it's important to note that in the 2012 plan of management for this area, there is absolutely zero mention of basketball courts. And what's particularly troubling the community is that the consultation for the new plan of management was underway. So step one, there was no basketball courts noted in any plan of management. Consultation is underway, and maybe basketball courts could have been included after that consultation period and the second plan of management had been updated. So this process seems to have been hijacked midstream. And certainly the local residents, the Friends of National Park, feel that they were not consulted. They were very surprised to be notified just the day before that construction was being commenced. And so we have a problem with speaking to our community here. And we all know from records from the residents that during consultation, basketball courts were not raised as a top priority by the community. And Councillor Mackenzie is correct. The argument about asphalt is an argument you're making, and I agree. Who wants asphalt in a green space? But that's not the argument. The argument is why basketball courts, why 6 basketball courts, and why now, when the plan of management process was still underway and community consultation was midstream. I also won't be supporting this. I don't believe saying simply that the project aligns with the intention of a plan of management is good enough. And I believe that the Local Government Act requires us to be more specific and prescriptive about the uses that we allow on community land.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? You've already spoken, Councillor Mackenzie. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Robinson.
Hey, I'd just like to say I don't think I've ever seen John Mackenzie riled up or route. No different tonight. I don't think it's your job to say that he was riled up and cantankerous, and he was nothing. He spoke in his normal tone and say he was yelling. He was in the same room. I never seen that at all. And you sit there and say that about him, and like I don't agree with everything John Mackenzie goes on for 10 minutes, but what he said there, you listen to his point and take it on board. Not once.
Councillor, I'm going to bring you to order, and you need to talk about the substantive matter before us. Are there any other speakers? Are there any other speakers, councillors? If there are no other speakers, I will use my right of reply. I obviously am very passionate about ensuring we're delivering high quality public infrastructure throughout the city. And it was identified with me quite some time ago that northwestern corner of National Park not only was quite derelict, but it was also under the threat of development under a previous council. And there were several different iterations of expressions of interest and plans to build on that area. And this council not only has protected any construction of building on that northwestern corner, it was completely closed off from public access and not very well utilised. Once the Life Without Barriers lease finished, there was obviously an issue with the building that was damaged due to fire. But once that was sorted out, council staff actually embarked on quite an extensive program and invested a lot of time and effort into opening up that area for public open space. And that's not even sporting infrastructure. That's gardening, grassing the area, levelling it out, putting in new fill, which I think is a really great outcome, and the community was very happy with that. At the same time, they looked at the disused asphalt and wanted to make sure that that space was activated, like we have done in many other areas throughout the city. And basketball courts are very well used. Lots of inner city areas have them because you can play all sorts of games on them, not just basketball. They are good for many different activities, but they're also free. But both genders play the same sport, and they actually have a good outcome that they can be activated any time of the day. The other wonderful thing about the second phase of the works the staff have planned there that I think is really great is actually some of the asphalt is being removed, over 1,200 square metres, and replaced with grassed area, as well as a drinking fountain and seating and shade. And basically that's what the community is requesting. Now, once we go through a very good, rigorous process and update the plan of management, which could take up to 2 years, we also then have to allocate funding for the works that flow out of that. So what I would say to you this evening is not only have the staff done a wonderful job, these courts were ready and available to use when the global pandemic started, but if we waited to activate that space to going through a full master planning process, then the implementation of a master plan, for example, like we did at Blackbutt, which took over 10 years from the time of consultation to the delivery of the playground, which I'm very proud of there, that over $1 million worth of playground at Blackbutt. That was 10 years. Now, what I say to you is the staff have moved swiftly and activated a very disused area that the community can use for the next decade while a new master plan is consulted, funded and implemented. Now, the final use on that site might be something completely different, but at least for a decade, it's going to be well used and well utilised. And that is a wonderful outcome for our community. And I am represented all the time by people that are very happy with that infrastructure, particularly at Novocastrian Park, out at Wallsend, over at Empire Park and the new courts there. People like it. They appreciate that investment. I commend the motion to you. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
My division, Lord Mayor.
All those in favour, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Nelms, Councillor Winnie Bart, Councillor Clausen, Councillor Dunn, Councillor White. All those against, please raise your hands. Councillor Robertson, Mackenzie, Rufo and Church. I declare that motion carried. Thank you, councillors.